Hello, good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
I hope you're having a good evening and hope you're having a wonderful December so far.
Yes, it's winding down.
Yes, and I love Christmas. I don't need gifts. I don't need no carols. I don't need nothing.
Okay, so we have that on record, right? He doesn't need gifts.
I just love Christmas. I celebrate the fact that Jesus came. Yes, Marcia, good night.
Good night.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thanks for being on.
Sorry for the late.
Yeah, about a minute or so.
A minute or two. But it matters. So we're glad that you're here.
Thank you.
And we're just going to wait for others to come on.
Yes.
As we get ready to delve into this very important topic.
Yeah.
We're going to get...
It's a good thing Billy is a counseling psychologist. As I'll be lost in most of these discussions.
No. Good night, Pastor Adrian. It's nice to see you, man. I haven't seen you in a while. Welcome. And we hope that you guys can really share tonight, feed into what we're going to be talking about, because this is something that is taboo. Yes, I know it's festive season and everything, and you know, we want to keep it light, as some people would say, but we want to keep it also real and productive and helpful. So we want to hear from you guys. Some of you may experience it. You may not want to share your own experience, but you may have known of somebody else. Don't share any identifiers, just share the stories if you're able to. And definitely we'll be able to learn from each other. And as we get ready to wind down,
and this may not affect you.
Yes.
And we hope that it never affects you. But it's a reality that some people face.
Yes.
And so we want you to do us a favor, just like the live, you can share it. Somebody else might very well benefit from it. Yes? We're still just holding on for a few more people to come on.
Yes.
I'm doing my customary sharing while my wife forget to... I'm the tech advisor.
I'm not very the technical, the subject person.
Right, you're the expertise.
I never remember to share, but you guys are doing a good job. Thank you. And he does a very good job. So definitely, you know, send a share, start a watch party to get persons on so we can discuss this topic and really grow tonight.
And this is a heavy topic. And mind you, we also want you to know, and you have seen it in our discussions since June, that, and it has been since June.
Yeah, it's been a while.
That we are not afraid to touch most topics, and we still have a lot to go.
Yeah.
So, yes, Marcy wants to know the topic. Now, we said already, this may not have affected you, but we have done enough. She has done a lot of counseling. I have done some of that. And as a professional, she has seen quite a bit more than I have as a pastor. But sexual assault is a real issue. In fact, it is a big issue right now in Trinidad and Tobago. Because of what has been happening with a lot of our young women.
Yes.
And we thought it necessary to discuss it at this time. And not only young women, but we are seeing that a number of children have also been abused. In fact, they said the dynamics relating to COVID will make our children more vulnerable. They're not in school where they have excellent supervision. Some of them don't come from homes where the parents can't find the time because they work and so forth. Now, we wanted to know that will have an impact on your relationships.
Yes.
And some people are wondering, why is it I can't connect with persons? Why is it I'm having these issues? Why it is my wife or my husband may be operating the way they do. Sometimes it's because they have had some kind of history relating to being sexually abused.
Yes, and I just want to add to that, it's a big problem in the Caribbean. We have worldwide, I think the statistics are about 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 or so boys sexual abuse as children, and the risks get higher as the person ages. So when we go into the teenage years, we see more of that happening. When we have special populations like those who come from poor families, those who come from single parent family where there's less monitoring. Never even talked about the COVID, because soon enough we're gonna have to talk about the COVID family, because that's gonna be a family. These are people who are at higher risk for abuse, and then what happens is, I always like to say this, they grow up with the abuse, the impact of the abuse, and the church receives so many of them. As a matter of fact, the church has a lot of them from the time it's happening. Unfortunately, we've had so many cases where the perpetrators were church people,
church leaders, pastors,
leaders,
priests.
those sort of things. And so these children are growing up in church, trying to have, you know, good, healthy relationships, moving into marriages, and then wham bam, or relationships before marriage, and then things begin to happen. So we want to really look at that and help somebody move into an understanding, or move into accessing help for themselves or their spouse, or their partner, if this is a reality for them.
And
right?
Maybe you would have gone through, or you know of somebody who would have gone through and is not having an impact anymore. Maybe it is that they got some help, God delivered them, God freed them. So we believe in the power of God to deliver us and so forth. But it is not something that you can just minimize.
No.
You should also not hide it. Remember, we spoke about a couple of weeks. We spoke about secrets about privacy and so forth. Yeah, that is something that you should share. Yeah?
Well, let's get into it. You know, I want to start with what Nevin just said about the church. One of the things that the church has done, and I want those of you who are, I see Pastor Adrian on, Sister Stacy, you guys can share what has been your experience and what you think the church can or has done. One of the things the church has done is to, when they find out about sexual abuse in their members, in the women especially in situations where they're younger women or married women, mature, like adolescent girls or married women, they tend to say, well, the power of Christ is enough to deliver you. And so they kind of minimize the impact of the sexual abuse on that person. And I'm sure you'll recognize that not many men talk about it.
Right.
So it's even more hidden for male victims.
Yeah. And we believe, and this to be clear, and Billy wasn't saying this, I'm just reaffirming in case you may think otherwise. We believe the power of God can heal, restore, and we believe in deliverance and so forth. So there's no doubt about that. But that's God gave us some wisdom and understanding so that we can also help in the healing process. So let's just start with a definition. Good night, Valda. We want to really get into this. So there's a standard definition. Well, not really standard, but it very much speaks to what is standard. So sexual trauma, which would include a whole list of things. It could be contact sexual trauma, non-contact sexual trauma. So we have rape, we have incest, we have molestation, we have trafficking now. That's a big issue. So we have to be so careful when it comes to our young people, because trafficking is a big issue. So it is definitely a term that refers to any of these types of abuse, and I named them already. Molestation, intimate partner violence, because we know even in marriages we can have that type of abuse happening. And the trauma could be a single event, it could be one-off, or it could be a prolonged type of abuse. And it doesn't have to be penetration, sexual penetration. It could be that somebody took advantage and physically touching areas that they should not have. So that's the molestation, but you also have, like you're saying, it doesn't have to be penetration, correct? Because we also have what we call non-contact, where the person has to witness something. So they could have you watch pornography, they could have you watch people performing sex, you could... and that can cause its own trauma.
So that's all a part of sexual abuse, And like I said earlier, in the Caribbean, our numbers are pretty high. Quite a number of young girls do become victims of sexual abuse, and young boys. But we know primarily the victims are women. and the perpetrators are male, they tend to be, and I want us to be very careful with this, be very aware of this, the perpetrators tend to be male, older male. They also tend to be known to the victim and the victim's family. So there's always that, you know, I didn't expect that. I didn't see that coming from these situations.
Even
because
family
they were
member.
family members, they could be family friends,
Good
they
neighbor.
could be, like we said,
Or they
people in
thought
the
a good
church,
neighbor.
a good neighbor.
They thought a good neighbor.
Well, that's up until this happened, and even sometimes up after, because what happens often, let me put this in now, is that oftentimes people don't talk about the issue.
Or they don't believe.
Or they don't
So
believe.
it is reported and it's not believed.
It's not believed, right. Okay, so you want to go ahead with some of the...
So the impacts are immediate. They can also be long-term. The repercussions of sexual assault don't always show up immediately. And they may change in every developmental stage. So emotional reactions, you may have symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. You may have self-perceptions. Billy, you go ahead.
Physical and other physical or chemical, biochemical issues happening in the body. So we call that somatoform. You'll see some things happening. You will have sexual effects. So we're going to be coming to that. We're just trying to lay the foundation. Interpersonal effects, that's another big one, and social functionings. So if you look at it in relationships and intimate partner marriages and intimate partner relationships, you'll find a lot of issues with emotional impact, interpersonal impact, and physical physical and sexual impact. All right, so the person may have had the abuse some time ago. It may not have been in your time as a partner, but the impacts continue, or the effects continue to exist. All right, so we want to bring you guys in at this point. We want to bring you in at this point, and we want to ask the question: do you think that a person who has had sexual trauma in their past, do you think they need to reveal that to their partners? That's where we're going to start. We want to get you guys involved. Yes. So let me repeat the question again. Do you think someone who has had sexual trauma or sexual abuse in their past needs to reveal that to their partner? Marital or even courting. Yes, do they need to reveal that? All right, so we want to hear from you guys. We're going to wait for you guys to share on that question. All right, so
go ahead.
Okay,
no,
right.
go ahead.
So when it comes to now some of the, I want to go into some of the actual impacts on the relationship. So you're building this relationship with somebody, you have gotten married, and then things start to happen. There's some things that begin to happen on the psychological level. Remember I shared before, there's emotional, there's physical, sexual, and the interpersonal could be real problematic or troubling in situations like that. So one of the things that happens in the relationship, the persons are married or in a serious relationship, and oftentimes when the trauma is not processed, when the trauma is hidden, or even if it is not hidden anymore but not processed, one of the things that can happen is that there can be a pushing away of the spouse. So you're living with this person, you feel happy to be with this person, you believe the person really loves you, but then you realize there's always this interaction that keeps you at arm's length, even in marriage. And you're saying, you know, it's just the person's personality, but so many times it's more than just the personality, but it is the unsolved or unresolved trauma of the sexual abuse. All right, so we still want to hear from you guys. The question again that we're starting with you is, go ahead, you can repeat it.
Do you think that the person who has been sexually abused, molested, if they should reveal that to their partner, whether in the courtship stage or marriage?
Yes.
Should they say it before marriage?
Yes.
Yeah. So we wait on you. Yes, just put yes or put no. Whatever answer you'd want to put there.
Or explanation.
Explanation.
Go ahead.
So this or the psychological impacts now. There'll be a feeling of defenselessness, and as if the body is not theirs.
Yes.
Right.
So let me explain a little bit more, so you can look at the other ones. One of the things that happens in rape and sexual trauma is that the person becomes victim and powerless. So especially in aggressive situations where the person was held down, where there was violent threats, where there were physical actual violence against the person, they would have often after a while just stopped fighting, stop trying to resist, because they feel I no longer have control over the situation. And what that turns into is a feeling that I no longer have control over my body. And so in that situation, they are the victim. And here's what: many people go into their relationships with the same victim mentality. So they're in their relationships and they're feeling as though their body is no longer their own still, and they don't have the choices or the options to decide what they want, when they want, how they want to do with their body. All right? So the question, okay, never split up the question. Should you reveal that to your spouse? We're talking about now feeling as if your body isn't yours.
Yeah.
And so many times you would have partners in marriage, and we're going to get into some of it, who don't like certain things in the sexual encounters in marriage. Not that they are cruel things, not that they are unhealthy things,
or they don't want to be,
or they don't want to be their partners, but because of the history of trauma, many times it reminds them, and they feel that they cannot say no, or they cannot say change or do it this way. So they have that helplessness when it comes to their body, feeling as if the person who I'm with is the one who controls me, and therefore controls the whole encounter.
And if you're just joining us, we're talking about the impact that sexual abuse or assault may have on a relationship or marriage. Now, as we said, it is our hope that this will not happen to anybody.
Yes.
But the reality is that there are people who have been unfortunately impacted like this. Many of them have gotten better and have been generally been able to live normal lives.
Yes.
But sometimes there's some impacts that may have on a relationship. So we're still, you're all not talking to us tonight. I think this is too heavy tonight. I think we might be too heavy tonight. But talk to us. Do you think it should be revealed? Do you think you should not say it to your spouse? They're married now and you're happy. It's probably not affecting you anymore. Should you still say something about it? Come, talk to us.
Yes.
And then there's also these are the impacts now, distorted views of others and over sexualizing intent. So again, that is as a result of the fact that you had the traumatic experience, and sometimes it may distort how you view certain actions and so forth.
Of your partner. But let me add to that. Here's a good example. There's some spouses that you have met some, I'm sure I have met some partners in relationships where they, sometimes it really is so, but they would say to you, they only want sex. Every time you come, it's sex you want. And well, yes, but it's very valid, man. And so the person is no longer able to see the intent of others as being anything less than just sexual, because they themselves have begun to see their bodies and themselves as just sexual objects because of the abuse. And this especially happens when you've had cases with prolonged abuse, all right? And so the person now begins to question the spouse's intent, questions the spouse's motivation for certain actions. So they may touch them a certain way, and they automatically feel it's not just intimacy, it's sex. And because of the aversion to sex, we're going to come to that, because of the aversion to sex, they begin to think everything is sexual, and it leads into another point that we have here, that it begins to lead to anxiety and fear. Right? So you want, go ahead.
And then what happened, one of the other impacts is that they reliving the abuse during consensual intimacy, leading to anxiety. And then that can have some other impacts, because if your body is still tense, if there is a physiological response to what is going on, then it may affect your ability to enjoy the sexual experience, and it was meant for enjoyment. It may
and connection.
It may affect the ability of the sexual organ to, if you're a man, give, a woman receive, that kind of thing. And so that's why this must be taken seriously. We also know that you can experience healing from this.
Yes.
It will take some work. Billy will tell me she's a counseling psychologist, but I think over time something like this can get better.
Right, and I want to just bring a practical example. So we're going to get a little bit gory. So if you have your children around me after this, don't worry, we're not going to get too crass, right? But one of the things, like Nevin said, sex is supposed to be pleasurable, and the way God made our bodies, it prepares us for sex. So once arousal takes place, things happen. The woman becomes lubricated, the man becomes erect and firm enough to enter, and so there's not a painful generally experience because of lubrication and proper, firmness. That's what I'm gonna say, solidity, firmness. But in situations, and it happens in marriage, even where there is. Even in marriages where there is that anxiety and fear because that spouse is reliving the trauma of their past abuse, many times the body does not function well. So in the case of a woman, she may not get lubricated. And you may begin to think, now, why am I not having this effect? And the man may wonder what happened to her, something wrong with her. In cases of men, they may have erectile dysfunction. They may not be able to keep the erection, or they may not be able to have an erection in the first place. And so the sexual experience is definitely impacted. And one of the other things I want to add, and this is not only linked to abuse, but is very much indicated in cases of abuse, where statistics continue to show that most women do not experience orgasm in sex. So you have a woman
not regularly enough.
Not regularly enough. There's some women I've had women who have said to me, I've been married for like 6-7 years, I've never had an orgasm. And I'm thinking,
So
are you
that's
having
not normal.
sex?
Yeah.
Definitely. And it's sometimes, and most of them have had a history of sexual trauma. Right? So no, of course, that is not the only factor,
thing.
but it is
because there are women who have had sexual trauma, but they're able to
deal with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
For some reason or the other, some people are able to just compartmentalize things, and the effect is not there.
No, we're having some silence. Come on, people, we want to hear from you. I know it's Christmas. Deck the halls.
Yes, but here's the reality. We are actually facing a sort of spike in Trinidad particularly Trinidad, but I'm sure it's in Tobago too. And everywhere is dealing with the COVID issue.
Yeah.
And well, God forbid that our children are violated in any way.
Yeah.
Here's the reality, is that you're going to have more children, God forbid, who may be violated, and that would be more children who may have issues with relationships and connections and so forth. And so that's why we're talking about this. We'll also say to you, if you have a child that has experienced this, or you know of a child, Billy, you would give some specific advice. They need help.
Yes.
They need help.
Yes. And I want to just add to that, specifically if you have a person, a child, or an individual.
And it's an adult or
even
a child.
Even an adult, yes. It's important to report it. One of the things that we have found over time is that people do not report abuse. Sexual abuse. One, I shared a video before on my Facebook. One is because so many times the perpetrator is known. The person who caused the hurt is known, and they are often big enough in society or life to for the case to be ignored. And so what we see then is many adults coming out as adults saying, I was as a child. And people say, but why are you only now saying it? Why you never say it before? How are we supposed to believe you now? I want us to bear this in mind. Many times the shame, and we're going to talk about some of that too, the shame and the impact of the trauma keep people from talking about it, keep them from disclosing, keep them from reporting. But if you are an adult, if you are a friend, a family member, you know of something like this happening, it really is important that you report it and you have that person get help. So after the legal part of it, that person needs help in terms of counseling and processing the trauma and healing from the trauma of the abuse. The reality is that most people can, and with proper help will overcome the trauma of the abuse. All right?
And then we're
not seeing the answers yet?
No. We're dealing with some behavioral impacts now. Now, it's similar to what we have mentioned. Being uncomfortable, unable to communicate likes and discomforts of sexual intimacy. So
Yes.
there's just this general dis-ease about
Yes.
discussing those matters. And then you have a situation of being easily started during sex. Yeah?
Or any intimate encounter for that
Or any
reason.
intimate
So
encounter.
they may touch you a certain way, and what happens, we call it reliving. That person may go back to that feeling when they were being abused, and so many times they may experience that fear, that startling, that fright from the situation. Somebody was asking what we're talking about. We're talking about the impact of sexual abuse or assault on relationships and marriages, all right? Even in the Christian setting. Now, here are some of the you want to go with the
Right, we
behavioral
continue.
impacts?
Right, so
develop.
developing poor sexual habits at a young age. There's a loss of boundaries and so forth. And we're talking about this because there are statistics coming out that are clearly saying that there is an increase in these kinds of activities. We can say without a doubt in Trinidad and Tobago that we're seeing that. We don't know if that is happening every single place.
So you can tell us, are you seeing that happening where you are, whatever island, whatever country you are in? And then back to the question we were asking earlier before we get to our next question for you guys to engage with us, is that do you think that somebody who has been sexually assaulted need to report it? Do they need to report it? Not report, but do they need to share it with their partner? Especially in marriage. Is that one of those nuggets of truth about them that must be shared?
Or share.
Right? So we want to hear from you guys. We have a few of you on. Thank you for sticking around.
Yes.
But tell us, do you think that must be shared?
There's also an unwillingness to explore new sexual things. That could be positions or what have you. Your bed is your bed, and the bed is undefiled. We make that very clear.
No violence or
no violence. Well,
the health.
Let's not go any further.
Yeah, that's not the topic tonight.
Seeing the spouse's forcefulness as traumatic. Now, this force shouldn't be so forceful that it could cause scare generally, but it may not have been such a level that you would think the person would be traumatized. But if you have gone through trauma, then that could come through.
Yes, definitely. And go ahead.
So some Christians are trained.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, honey. Some Christians have been trained to think that proper believers will not continue to experience traumatic symptoms for the rest of their lives because of Christ's liberating work. And I believe that happens. Yes, Christ liberates you. You don't have to deal with that anymore. Yes, and if you have gotten over it, praise the Lord. But there can be some lasting repercussions nonetheless.
And so again, we're saying that, because we said it earlier, we're not saying that God cannot deliver, because most certainly he can. But if we're just saying we're waiting and there's nothing else to be done at the personal level, at the interpersonal level.
If you're just praying.
Prayer can do it too, but you have to do your part.
Right, I'm just saying, if it can't just be prayer. Yes, and we believe in the power of prayer, but it can't just be prayer.
Prayer alone.
For that child or for that young lady or what have you.
Or that woman, definitely. So I wanted to look at some of the actual emotions, and not all of them, because we won't have time for all of them. We're already at past. And we're still waiting to hear from you guys. But what are some of the things that a person may experience when they have this in their background? One of the first emotions that they have is shame. Shame. The thing about shame is that shame keeps you hidden. Shame makes you feel as if there's something about me that if I reveal, persons wouldn't love me anymore. And that's one of the first reasons why they don't reveal it to their spouse in the first place, because it's unprocessed, it's still affecting them. They still may be living with PTSD symptoms, and definitely they feel, if my spouse knows about this, they won't love me anymore. They won't see me as desirable, as whole, as wholesome, and so they keep that fact, because the trauma itself, when it happened, was one that brought shame. All right? But I like to use this with shame, should have already mastered everything. That's not necessarily the truth. It is actually very important for us to share when these situations happen with our spouses and we get into serious relationships. The other thing, we actually touched on it, fear and anxiety. Because of the, especially if it was like a forced situation, a surprise attack, many times persons may have feelings of anxiety and fear. And this happens, we're talking about in general, but I'm talking about in the marriage. Good evening, Maria, and welcome. Feelings of fear and anxiety in their intimate relationships when they have a history of sexual abuse in their past. And so this often also leads into depression. So one of the things that can happen is that, and you're going to come in after a while, one of the things that happens is that that person, we shared it a little bit, begins to now see and feel bad after their sexual experience with their spouse. Now, whereas your marital sexual experience, as Nevin said, the bed is undefiled, marriage is honorable, it's supposed to actually give you that, wonderful feeling and release those sleep and those good feeling hormones. What happens is it releases stress hormones, and that person becomes anxious and fear and high levels and high levels of stress and depression can actually result. So imagine coming out of an experience where the unimpacted partner is thinking, oh, this experience was really good. Well, if they're not feeding into what's happening with the other person, and the other person is lying there whimpering or curled up thinking, this is keeps happening to me.
I may they may not even be curled up.
Yes.
They may have learned how to show their trauma, not so?
Yes. They hide it.
They know how to not reveal it, right? And because they want to protect their marriage, they don't want their spouse to feel like something horrible has happened for something that they think is really wonderful.
Right.
And so and eventually it creates, and then the other thing is, because you have kept something like this so serious, hidden, it can actually affect communication level and the ability to be intimate with the other person and share details and fears and concerns about your life.
I think we have a comment. Somebody's saying there, you're seeing it?
Yes.
When you're courting, we are not seeing all of them as they come up, but when you're courting, you're saying no. Somebody's saying no, but when you get married, that you should share it.
Personal choice.
And it's a personal choice. Somebody said that?
Yeah, look at that.
Personal choice. Okay, yes. So we're still looking at your comments as well. Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
And we want to hear some more feedback where that is concerned. That issue of the personal choice is a good starting point, I want to say. But we have to be so careful because the Bible says that the two have become one. And many times, and we would have gotten into this, but let me get into it now. While it was your individual trauma before us, when we now become one, we become now a couple, partners, the trauma becomes extended. And here's how it can become extended. The way I behave or misbehave in my intimate relationships with him can actually become traumatizing for him. And if he doesn't understand where this behavior or misbehavior is coming from, he's left there now wondering, is it him? Was this a good decision to marry this person? When the truth is, openness in the process really could have helped this situation. And so the trauma becomes extended.
Right. It's a tricky one to deal with because if you have gone through this and you have gotten over it, it's not affecting your marriage, at least right now. I think the key part there is right now. Then the person may reason to themselves, do I really have to say something? I'm
I think
over
she's
this
saying
now.
that further down, Luan saying courtship does not necessarily end in marriage. Right.
So is that something you really want to share? While married, I say it's a personal choice since persons may have gotten over it and don't want to return to that issue. That's true.
Yes.
And so, that is the conundrum. Do I share something that I have gotten over? And if you have gotten over it, praise be to God. And if it's not going to affect the marriage, then that's good. But what if it comes up years after? What if the issue What if something triggers?
I think somebody was just saying that. So look at the comment.
Yeah.
You know, I want to suggest that you should bring it up. When you come into a marital relationship, Christ gives us the liberty. The Bible talks about liberty. And in Christian marriages, there ought to be that liberty, that vulnerability, that openness.
In
I
marriage
think,
generally.
In marriage generally. But I mean, we have that extra advantage as people of God.
Yeah.
And I'm saying in these situations, there really should be full disclosure.
Yeah. So there's a comment here. Sometimes when disagreements arise in the marriage, the spouse take your past life for topic for verb. No, that's
okay.
That's
spouse, going to the other side.
Yeah, that spouse needs help.
Yes.
Yeah, that is wicked. That is taking trauma and multiplying it
and re-traumatizing the person.
Yeah, if that person is doing that, I don't think that's a great person to be around.
Well, if you're already married, but here's the situation. Oh, my computer. Here's the situation with that.
Yeah. So you can't.
Go ahead.
Let me tell you why that is borders on wicked. Yes, and I'd say that's wicked. So the person shares this with you, you then push it back on them. That's wickedness. I don't think that person.
Not well intentioned.
No, that's not good. No, I know we can say some tough things when we're angry and what have you, but taking that and throwing it in their face, using it, yeah, that's tough. And I think that might be the reason why some persons may be reluctant to share something like this. But if you're married to somebody who loves you, they would guard that.
Yes.
They would guard that with their life. They would guard. Yes. They would never bring that up as a way to diminish you and to get at you. For me, that would be really, really a line that nobody should cross.
But let me add something there. One of the issues that come up often with persons who have had especially prolonged chronic abuse, sexual abuse especially, because of and they have not processed it, they have not healed from it. One of the things that they struggle with is actually building and choosing proper partners. And so yes, these people may end up in relationships with persons who are not well intentioned, who really don't appreciate them for who they are, because they already have a poor way to understand and manage their boundaries,
relationships,
because they're still seeking for healing through an individual. And so that's
why the person who has been traumatized sometimes end up in a traumatic,
an abusive relationship.
If in fact this happens to the children of those who have been traumatized too.
Yes.
There is a vicious cycle. It just keeps going and going again. That's why we're saying in this time, those of us who live in Trinidad and Tobago, this is why this is so important. Firstly, please, let's do our best to protect our children, both male or female.
Yes.
Let's do our best to protect ourselves and avoid certain things. But I'm telling you, the reports we're reading, literally every day, and there was another report today of a 13 and a 6-year-old who was sexually assaulted. I'm just thinking not only about their life now, and I hope they get the help now, but I'm thinking, what happens when they start to date? One is 13, has already probably started to have certain feelings. And that's why I'm saying this is a topic that we have to reflect on a little bit, you know? And maybe we can empower some persons going ahead in terms of what you do when your child or even yourself, if you have been faced with these things. So we believe, we're just tying up that part there.
Yes. When I get to that.
The honesty, I think, the openness, I think, I leave that to the person who has been traumatized, because they're the persons who have gone through it. I totally affirm that you have a choice as to whether or not you want to share that. But the transparency is something that might be necessary, and
it's actually therapeutic too.
Might be therapeutic, and I'll also say that it could even strengthen your marriage. Yes. Yeah, it may strengthen your relationship. It may also cause some trouble, because not everybody will take it well, and so that's why what Luan is saying there is so interesting, leaving it to a personal choice. But whoever it is, they have to be really wise. Pray about it. See God's face about it before you take another step. Yeah.
You know, we want to ask one other question here as we go ahead now. So, And this is for, I think we had a few pastors on I saw on
Yeah.
tonight. I would
I
like
don't
we
know if
like
they're
to
still
hear,
on.
and even church persons, you guys in churches. How do you think the church can minister to those persons who they know to have been abused? And you're gonna say, well, we don't know of many, but everybody knows of one person. And it may not be in the church setting, but we want to know, how do you think a church can minister to such persons? So again, we're going to wait for your good night, Nikita. Welcome. Nikita, we want to hear your comments. How do you think the church, the pastors, the leaders in the church can minister to victims of sexual abuse who are in the church, especially if they know that they are moving, especially as they see the young people moving into love relationships and moving into marital relationships? How do you think they can minister to them? All right. So one other thing we want to look at. So we talked about the emotions. We talked about the shame, the fear, the anxiety, the depression. And one other one I want to touch on, because there's so many others, is that feeling of anger and aggression. So many times we see relationships where a particular spouse is always angry, always aggressive, always quote unquote making a fuss, and it is not just a basic, warranted kind of thing. But when we look into their history, there is some issue of abuse or trauma. So many times they continue to hold that if it's unprocessed, and their partners and persons around them can become now victims of their venom. All right. So the victim can become the perpetrator in many ways. And while they may not always become sexual abusers, victims of sexual abuse can become abusers of other kinds. All right. So that's very important.
Right.
Go ahead.
And I'm thinking the sexual experience is exciting, but can be so complex. And I can imagine that there's some persons who, in establishing that connection, you have had things happen. Either your spouse doesn't want to have sexual intercourse too often, huh?
Yeah.
Because having it infrequently would help them, because they don't have to be
Deal
so
with it.
vulnerable.
Yes.
And the spouse might be saying, "What happened? I desire to have sex more often. What is happening?" And they think it's something wrong. They don't love me or what have you, and they may not even know that there might be an issue.
Yes.
You see, that's why we're saying this is so important, because there's some couples who have found themselves in an unsatisfactory sexual relationship
Or
cold bed, and they're wondering why is it. And we're not saying this is the explanation of everything, by the way. Let me make that clear.
Yes.
This is not the explanation of everything. It's a complex thing, but sometimes that's the case.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. I saw Nikita just say something
Yes.
there.
Don't beat them over the head with the Bible. Love them. Oh, this is a response. Excellent. Be patient. Get them professional help. Ministers should be careful counseling these issues if they're not trained.
Thank you for that, Nikita. So,
Well, and I tell Billy this, and I totally agree with it. There are some people who overnight become pastors, or even higher, without going through any proper studying and what have you. And I don't believe you. Every pastor has to go to a seminary, or even all the. But every people that can just call it themselves called pastor just one time, with nothing. And the same thing with counselors. Now, I want this to be clear. I am not a professional counselor. Yeah. Can I give biblical advice, pastoral care? Certainly. Do I have some basic understanding of counseling and what have you? Yes, I've done a few courses. She's the counselor. She did a degree in it, and another degree, and another degree. And so please be careful. Your pastor can help you. At least talking with them can start the process. So that's what we're there for. Sometimes we don't even have anything to say. We just are ears for persons to pour out themselves. Yeah. But a good pastor would then say, I think this is something that I need to refer to somebody else, because this is beyond my professional ability.
Yes.
Yeah? But so what you said there, Nikita, is so true. I want you to know, most pastors are not professional counselors. We have a few. I know probably 2 out of 100. Yeah, but they're good in terms of the first contact.
Yes.
And
The
then pastoral care and ongoing pastoral care.
Yes.
Because that spiritual part, some counselors don't know anything about the spiritual part. Some do.
Deliverance becomes so important.
Deliverance becomes possible. So thank you, Nikita, for that. And this pastor will confess, I am not a professional counselor or psychologist. Reverend Waith is both a pastor and a counseling psychologist, and I know a few Mr. Pastor Gunpath. Yes, they're not many.
Yes. So again, Nikita share with us, but you are free to share again. How do you think the church can reach out? Thank you so much for sharing that, Nikita.
Yes.
We want to be wrapping up now. So we have a few what we call do's or don'ts. If you do find out, or I don't want to use the word find out because find out almost feels like it's accidental. But if you are in a relationship with
Could be
somebody,
accidental too, you know?
yes. But yeah, and let me put this in now before you don't want to have a third party tell your spouse that this is your story.
Or you're sharing this with somebody else and you have not told your spouse. And they
Unless the intention is to do that.
They pick up the phone and they see it, have discussion with this and that. That could really also make the issue a little tougher to deal with.
Yeah. Right.
Quickly,
so
we want to
remember those emotions, and we're going to move on. Right? So we talk about the fear, the anxiety, the depression, the shame, and the anger and aggression. Those two come together. These are some of the main feelings, emotions that a person would experience.
And we share the behavioral and the
aspects
and the physiological impact that may happen.
So there's some do's and don'ts when it comes to having a spouse with what we call sexual aversion. So if your spouse, and now that could be the main reason why it could not be, but if you have a spouse who is averse to sex, does not seem to enjoy sex, does not seem to want sex, and you know that there is a history of sexual trauma, then as Nikita said, you have to be very delicate. I'm just adding some words there with them. And one of the first things you do not do is that you do not blame them or think the effects of the sexual abuse should have been done away with by now. So I've heard this from persons before that happened so long ago. What's she still behaving so for? You know, so you're thinking, she's now 42 and she said that thing happened when she was 16 and she's still behaving like if she's 16. Do you know that because of things like PTSD, that 42-year-old may be still trapped in that 16-year-old brain and that 16-year-old experience? So definitely you don't want to be laying blame on them and saying to them, by this point, you're not really having an effect, you're just kind of pretending. All right, so you don't want to do that. So the abuse may have happened at a pivotal time in the development, and it may have really caused you to become stuck. We call it fixated in a developmental place. So the way you deal with life, emotionally, spiritually, physically, could be stuck in that developmental stage. All right, and then don't blame your partner. Here's some don't blame them. Don't blame them for being too demanding. Don't blame them for being unattractive. Don't blame them for being unappreciative of whatever physical attraction that you show. So you may want to say that you can come after. You may want to say, oh, I do everything for this woman. I do everything for this man. And they don't appreciate anything. They don't even carry themselves well. Now, are we condoning this sort of behavior? No. What we're saying is it's important to have that understanding. So I want to repeat those again. Don't blame your partner. Because ultimately, the blaming for these things can register in your partner's mind that just like he's blaming or she's blaming me now, they're saying they must blame me. They probably blame me for the abuse that I endure, the sexual abuse. And actually, that's one of the things that happens at that age. As a child, when they're sexually abused, they often think it must have been my fault. I did something to cause this. And when you're moving into a sexual relationship with your partner, your husband, your wife, and they're averse to sex, but you're blaming them, you're beating them for not being more open sexually without understanding, then definitely can take them back to the experience. Right?
Remember that your spouse's feelings of rejection will not disappear just because you reassure them that you really do love them, but just can't express it in the ways he or she wants. He or she may understand this to be true, but understanding in the head is different from the feeling in your heart, right? So we're saying, and the person, the spouse who has to then deal with this has to be really patient.
Yes.
Right?
That's the next point, actually. Go
So
ahead.
do ask for patience. Show immense gratitude for the patience. Find non-sexual ways to show your admiration and appreciation for this patience on a frequent basis. Daily, if possible. Certainly at least 3 or 4 times a week. So patience is going to be the key here.
Yes.
Yeah? And we don't, we pray none of these things happen. But if they ever happen, you have to be able to face it up.
Together.
Yeah?
And together. And what did that, I want to add to that point you just made, Nevin, about not feeling that because you are loving the person so well, that it should heal them. I'm telling you, love does have the power to heal, but love has to be coupled with other things for that person to heal fully from sexual trauma.
Yeah, the
all right?
counseling,
so
the deliverance, the prayer,
yes,
etc.
Yes. Somebody saying
yes,
just listening tonight.
excellent.
And here's another thing
Good night,
that we say: if you have a partner who's sexually averse, rather than just blaming them and saying they're not satisfying me, they're not interested in sex, maybe you just want to say to them, let's get some professional help. We always end with it, but we're putting it in now. Let's get some professional help and take time to educate yourself. Educate yourself about what your partner may be going through.
Right, and this may not just be abusive.
Yes.
If there is any sexual aversion, generally, so
yes.
you need to seek the professional help. Maybe one of these times we'll discuss it, and I think we touched on it. Life stages can cause different effects and may cause sexual aversion.
Right.
Somebody who's going through menopause, a woman going through the menopause, that can have an effect. And one of these days we'll probably go a little into it.
Right.
But if the person has gone through sexual trauma, it really will demand that counseling be done to work on the issues, maybe together, individually and otherwise.
And you have to educate yourself about what this can be. And here's the one thing I want to add to that. You don't want to allow yourself to now react or retaliate to your spouse's aversion to sex. Primary one, by going and having a partner who will satisfy you sexually.
That has happened. And
that happens too often without the spouse taking time to understand or be patient or help the person to the healing. Now, are we saying that this is the spouse is so let's use my example, an example of us here. Let's say I had a sexual trauma. Is it his responsibility to ensure that I am totally healed? Absolutely not. But as a couple now where we are one, it is definitely something that we both
do. It is in my interest.
Right. Yes.
It is in her interest and it is in my interest that both are whole.
Yes.
Both persons are whole.
Yes.
Yeah? That will just make the relationship more fulfilling and happy and happier.
Yeah. And here's what another thing you can do. So while you figure out, we have about 4 minutes. While you figure out what your spouse is dealing with, try to love them as much in their comfort zone until they take you to the next zone that they can go to. That's why we're saying patience is important.
Yeah.
Now, I'm hoping it doesn't take you 5 years, and that's why you should get professional help, whether it's a sexologist, a psychologist.
Yeah.
Get the professional help. A psychiatrist can also be very helpful. If there are physiological issues happening, for instance, the woman is not getting lubricated, the man is not having erections or keeping an erection, or maybe she's having painful sex and you know there's a history, then you need a physical doctor. All right? But definitely love the person intensely in their comfort zone and let them take you to the next level. What do you do in that time while you're feeling that all of your needs are not being met? Well, there are still ways to communicate it without being forceful and demanding, but saying, even if it's a miss, I love when you do that, or it'd be so nice if we could do this together. But if you genuinely love your partner and you know there's a history of sexual trauma, it's important that you don't try to force the person into that sexual place where you are if they're not there, because it really can re-traumatize the person. All right? We have to go ahead.
Yes, we're going to wrap up now. But this is what I want to say. If you have been traumatized in that way, you can still have a wholesome relationship and marriage. You can. Yes? And thank God it's not a terribly high percentage, but it is higher than we think. And there are persons who have had to deal with this, and some have been unable to have wholesome relationships because we have not encourage people to seek the help that they need. We think it's only crazy people go to counseling and so forth. But the truth is, there's some things that we can't handle by ourselves that we have to have somebody guide us through the process of healing. You can have a fulfilling marriage or relationship, even though you have gone through a situation like that.
And I want to just say, we have about 4 minutes. I want to say to, especially to a woman, because I'm a woman, and you know, we can speak woman to woman. If you have been a victim of sexual abuse in your past, you're married, you're in a courting relationship, you're moving towards desiring, because it's interesting that most women, Nevin talked about it earlier, have this in their head, but they can't translate it to their heart and their bodies in terms of interactions. If you are genuinely desirous of a healthy, enjoyable sexual relationship with your partner, with your husband, but you find yourself being held back because of the pain and the memories and the re-traumatization that happens because of your sexual past, it's important that you get some help. And one of the first things I want you to remember is that God is able to deliver, but allow this process to get you to the place of being able to enjoy your sexuality again, understanding it and being able to enjoy it, and then moving from that, you share it. So it's okay to become comfortable in your own sexuality, become comfortable with sex, but the next thing is to come to the place where you're comfortable sharing it and seeing it as a gift and not as a threat, or not as what thing you take by force, whatever that is. So it's and one of the things that happens with healing is that you're able to give your partner that gift of a wholesome, a healed sexuality.
You know,
right?
one thing that crossed my mind that we probably should discuss, I don't know if we could discuss it next week, is sex through the different stages.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, doctor, with that.
we will probably read up on that. And when I talk about that, if we had time, what I'm thinking about is what is sex in the early part of your marriage?
Yes.
What is sex like and the things that you have to go through when you have children?
Yes.
What is sex as you get to the stage of menopause?
Yes.
What is the sexual relationship? So tell us if you think that's something you want to talk about, because I think this has affected a lot of marriages and has affected it more than people would like to say.
And we don't talk about it because in the church, the piousness means that we have a controlled sexual life, when, you know, it's okay for you to have a wild, healthy sex life, but most times you can't experience it because of the trauma. Definitely,
so we'll see.
You go through the stages, as you go through the stages,
it's a number of stages, and then there's some unexpected events. Yes. So tell us, do you think that's something you might be interested in? If you think so, like it,
and just send us a message.
I send a message, and we'll see if we can go through that. We just want your relationships to be as fulfilling as God intended for it to be in every area. And for any person, no matter what they have gone through in their lives. Yes? Persons who have been assaulted are not persons who sought it out.
Yes.
They were victims, but they can also have fulfilling relationships.
Sexual
and we believe that.
Yeah.
And so that's why we have discussed this. This is an issue right now in many countries where our children young people are not in school, and so don't have the normal protection, and so that's why we have done it. I see some people are interested, and even stages, when we talk about stages, plus 60, plus 70, plus 80, is there sex for plus 70 and plus 80 people? They say, oh yeah. We will definitely look at that. I see some people are saying very interested. We will consider it. Let us pray for our young women, our children who have been traumatized. If you have been traumatized, we pray God's healing power to be upon you. Yes. And if you have never sought help, I'm telling you, there are counselors out there who are confidential. That includes my wife, who are skilled and who will help you navigate it. But if you are over it and fine and you don't want to go there, then that's fine. Okay. Yes? And that's up to you. But if you notice it's having an impact, just don't ignore it. Just don't say it will change.
Yes.
Because you're not just impacting yourself if you're married. You're impacting your
spouse.
spouse and you're impacting your family.
Yes,
Yeah?
definitely. So we speak healing to you,
In
we
Jesus'
speak
name.
wholeness, and we speak wholesome, healthy, enjoyable sexual experiences in your marriage.
Yes.
And if you're seeking to get married, I'm just reinforcing what Nevin said because
Yes.
our time is up. If you're seeking to get married and you still struggle with this as a part of your life,
You have to deal with it.
get some help.
You have
Get
to
some
get
help.
some counseling.
Don't put your marriage through that, because so many times people leave not understanding the real issue.
And then next week, we will probably be closing
We'll
off,
tie up.
and
Yeah, tie up for the year.
we'll look at sex at different stages.
Yes. Yeah. We want what's the sex again? Look at that.
Yes.
Well, that's a good way for Christmas, huh?
Yes,
Something that
yes.
good. Since we can't do nothing much for Christmas,
Praise
except
the
to stay
Lord.
home,
Somebody
so.
say hallelujah.
Okay, let's finish now.
God bless you.
Yes.
And please have a wonderful day.
Good night. Good night.